Hey guys, it's Brett, and thanks for dropping by my channel. And if you are a first-time viewer, welcome. So a lot of ground to cover today. Really quickly, I wanted to talk about this past week. There was two different book prizes. One that announced their winner, which was the Aspen Words Prize. Also, the Women's Prize announced their shortlist. After that, I want to get into the 15 books that I read for April. So let's go. Okay, so Aspen Words Prize announced this week their winner, which was Isabella Hammad's Enter Ghost. I'm thrilled with this. I thought it was a fantastic book. Obviously, with everything that's been going on right now in Palestine, this is extremely timely, and I found the whole thing incredibly engaging, really fascinating. So I was thrilled. She's also having an incredible week because this is one of the 6 finalists for the Women's Prize. So if you haven't read this yet, I would encourage you to check it out. The other books on that list, I've now read almost 5 of the 6. The Wren by Enright, which I had talked about this last month, that I had read and enjoyed. Brotherless Night, which was just fantastic, and I will talk more about that in a second since that's one of the books I read this month, as well as Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy, which, again, fantastic. It's already out in the UK. This is about to come out June 4th in the States. River East, River West, which I'm about 3/4 of the way through. I was really hoping to finish it before the end of the month, but I can't do it. But I'm really liking this as well. And finally, Kate Grenville's Restless, Dolly, Maunder. This is what I'm going to try to Maunder. This is what I'm going to try to read. One of the books I'm going to read in May, so I have them all read. So I can't speak for this, but I can speak for the rest and say it's a really fantastic group. And I don't think you can go wrong if you haven't read any of them, but are thinking maybe you'll try 1 or 2 of them. All of them are really good. All have incredible stories, amazing points of view, great characters, really interesting storytelling. So I think it's a really terrific group. All right, so moving on, let's get into the 15 books. Great month. Everything here I at least liked, but most everything here I really loved. So it really was one of the best months I had, both in terms of quality and quantity. So I'm thrilled. Again, I said I read Soldier Sailor. For those of you who haven't read this, this is a story about a woman talking to her young child sailor. It's all about the trials and tribulations and moments of joy in motherhood. It's almost reads like a thriller. It's relentless. It's harrowing at times. It's beautiful. And the last 4 pages, I literally was sobbing my eyes out. So I think for anyone who has, I will first say, been a mother, you will understand so much of this. But anyone who's been a parent and raised a small child from infancy and knows what that's like, I think there's something to identify with this. But that doesn't mean if you haven't done it at all, you won't, because you will, is what I'm saying, because it's really, really beautifully told and well done. Also, Brotherless Night, loved this, about a young girl during the conflict in Sri Lanka, of which I didn't really know anything about. So I learned a lot, as well as being enthralled with this story and this girl and her brothers and what happens. I thought it was absolutely terrific. I immediately went out and bought her first book because I just was like, I need more. And I was going to try to pull it to show to you. But if you see that massive pile behind me, it's towards the bottom and I'm not going to do all that. So anyway, but really great. All right, now on to the rest. Oye by Melissa Mogollon. This comes out May 14th in about 2 weeks. It is about a Colombian-American family living in Florida. There is a tropical storm, a hurricane bearing down, and the family is trying to get their grandmother out of her apartment before the hurricane hits, and she won't go. The catch of this book is the entire thing is being told from the point of view of Lucinda, who is a high school junior who is going through all of the college applications and all that stuff, while she is talking every day to her sister, Mari, who's in college, it's a one-sided conversation. You never hear the responses. You're only hearing Lucinda. And at first I was like, wow, is that going to be weird? And it was briefly, but then you just forget it and go with it. I listened to this on audio, and it, because of how the story is structured, it so lends itself to a fantastic book on tape, and I would highly recommend. But either way, I know a lot of people who just read it and loved it, so I would highly recommend this one when it comes out. It's really funny. It's really, really moving and really unique. And she is just a delight. So, also thank you to Hogarth Books for this. Next. I talked about this one. I will say this, like everything I had talked about wanting to read, I covered a lot of them. I was shocked, except for like one book maybe, that I got a lot of what I was going to read. Margo's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe. For those who didn't see my April Possibilities video, this is a fantastic book about a young woman who is a freshman at community college who's very smart, but ends up getting into an affair with her professor and gets pregnant and decides to keep the baby without really thinking it through. So she doesn't know what she's going to do for money. Her father is a retired WWF wrestler who's an alcoholic who's now living with them, and with her, I should say, and her roommate. So she decides to open an OnlyFans page to make money, and what happens? It is really funny, touching. Margo is an amazing character. You are rooting for her. Despite what you probably would assume because of the subject, it is going to be raunchy. It's not. There's a love story here. It's sweet. It says so much about women, about their roles in society, about sexuality and sexism, and she's playing with a lot in a fantastic way. David Kelly is adapting this right now for Apple TV, and Elle Fanning is going to be playing Margo, who is like just a terrific choice. So I would say, get this if you can when it comes out, which is in June. So it's great. And thank you to William Morrow Books for this copy. Okay. This book, The Safekeep by Yale van der Wouden. Oh my God, you guys. Probably one of my favorite books of the year right now. First of all, I want to frame this cover, but second of all, this story, oh my gosh, it is set in 1961 in a very rural Dutch province, and it centers on this woman who lives in the home that she grew up in with her two brothers. She's the youngest. They've kind of moved on, but when her parents died, in the will, the house is left to her oldest brother. She's very tightly wound woman, and probably not the friendliest. He sends her a letter and says he's coming into town. He has met this woman who is his fiance, and he's got to go back out of town for a while. And while he's gone, he wants her to stay at the house, which she's dead set against. So this woman shows up who is beautiful, somewhat of a free spirit, and she immediately is setting off things with this woman. On top of all that, things are going missing in the house, and she's convinced it's her brother's fiance who's taking the things, but she can't be sure yet. I don't want to tell you anything else. All I will say is it was so engaging. It went where I did not expect it to go. It is hella sexy. I mean, really sexy and sensual. I'm not going to say anything else, but I would please read this book when it comes out. I read it on a flight. I couldn't put it down. I tabbed it a lot. It's so good. It's so, 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 so good. So the Safekeep, check it out. Really good. And this is due 5/28, so like a month away. Mark it down. Oh, and thank you to Simon & Schuster for this. All right, out today, because I'm recording this yesterday, Real Americans by Rachel Khong. Really liked this. Very interesting book. It's a generational story. It's kind of three stories that are all tied together. It begins with a young woman living in New York City who is Chinese, who gets involved with a basically like Jay Gatsby, very wealthy, privileged, gorgeous white guy, and their relationship. The second story is their son, and him living now in up in the Pacific Northwest with his mother, who is now single. You don't find out why or what transpired between the first and the second story till as it unfolds. And then the last story is the story of her mother and her origin story. I really was with this the whole time. Each story I was completely engaged in. I thought they had a very definite point of view. My only thing that kind of bumps me on this is there were a lot of coincidences and conveniences that started to happen. And some of them I could accept, and some of them I could even go with, but there were others that started to get so excessive. I was like, really? Really? But that was just me. And I've talked to other people about it, and I know somebody else who was bummed by that. And then I know someone else who wasn't bothered by it at all and said, those kind of things happen. I just thought it happened excessively. But totally solid storytelling. I would say this is like really great, easy lit / summer book. So there you go with that. Witness by Jamal Brinkley. This was one on the Aspen Words shortlist. I've never read him before. And again, I've said this before, I'm not a huge short story fan, but I will say these are all really, really well told. My problem is, as I sit here and talk to you, this is the first book I read in April. My problem with short stories is I don't remember them well enough after a while, like unless there's something that so stands out, because you're not with any one story long enough to resonate that much. So when I can get through it and say, all very well written, all very interesting, I can't even begin to tell you what those stories were. So take that for what it is. Again, it's a me problem. That's my thing with short stories. You might love short stories, and if you do, check this out because it's a good collection. All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whittaker. All right, so Chris Whittaker fans, We Begin at the End. It was one of my favorite books that year. In retrospect, now that I've sat with this for a little, I think ultimately I might have liked this even more. I don't think it's a perfect book. And certainly I think at times it gets a little heavy-handed and verges on melodrama. That said, it clocks in at nearly 600 pages, and I flew through it so quickly. One of the reasons is the chapters are very, very, very short. So you'll find yourself saying, I'm just going to read one more chapter. I'm just going to read one more chapter. And it is such a propulsive narrative that you can't stop reading. It is about a young boy who named Patch, named that way because he's missing one of his eyes, who one day sees a girl from his high school being taken and pushed into a van by a man, and he saves her, and as a result gets taken. He spends some time in captivity in the pitch darkness he can't see with another person, a young girl, who they talk and kind of get themselves through this, and he's saved. That's kind of the very beginning of the book, so I'm not giving anything away. The rest of the story, though, the girl is gone, and everyone believes that it was probably just his imagination, and he believes she's true and that she's out there. So he sets out with his best friend, who is this young girl named Saint, to find this girl and also find this serial killer. So it's dark. It is epic. And I mean epic, like huge span of time epic. And I didn't know that's what I'd be getting. but it is kind of unputdownable, fantastic characters, and moving, engaging, lots of twists. I highly recommend. All right, speaking of lots of twists, and I'm bringing this up right afterwards because it feels like it could be a companion piece, if it were, weirdly. Wolf at the Table by Adam Rapp. Adam Rapp is also a playwright who was just nominated for a Tony Award. He has written with someone else the book adaptation of The Outsiders, the musical. He wrote the book for the musical, and he just got nominated for a Tony Award. So yay to Adam Rapp. Didn't know any of this when I started this, of course, but this is crazy. It's been described as The Corrections meets We Need to Talk About Kevin. It's a multi-generational story. Each chapter switches between a different sibling for the most part. One boy, and there are 4 girls in the family, but really the lion's share of it is just 2 of the girls get stories. But as the story progresses, the oldest sister and the mother begin to suspect that the son, the brother, is off. And that who he actually might be some kind of a monster. And I don't mean like turns into a werewolf. I mean like a serial killer. So I don't want to say too much. I was so captivated by this. It really becomes a meditation about proximity to violence. That's what it was to me, and how close it is for so many people. It's heartbreaking at times. It's relentless and it's intense. And I have a friend who's reading it and keeps texting me and being like, oh my God, this just happened. Oh my God, this just happened. But it's really, really, really well done and really well told. And it's not I will say this, if people are squeamish about violence, there's not much in here that you actually see, or there's nothing like that. It's more implied. But there is what I would say, plenty of menace, but a great, great book. Speaking of great books, The Coast Road by Alan Murrin. And thank you to Harper Veer for this. I first became aware of this book when I was looking at things that were going to be coming out, and Gillian Anderson, the actress, had said this is one of the best books that she'd read in a while. So I was like, I have to find out what this is. Alan Murrin, Irish writer, love me Irish, and it is about a small town on the coast. A group of 3 women. The first has been in a marriage that she kind of wants out of. And I should preface this by saying this is before the referendum came through in Ireland that allowed divorce to happen, the early 90s. So, but she really wants out of her relationship because it's just not working with her husband. She has a number of kids. The second woman had an affair and left her husband and has returned to the town to kind of reestablish her place in the community. And the last woman is in an abusive relationship. These stories and these women will all intersect, and it's what happens. I couldn't put this one down. Almost read this in one go. It unfolds slowly at first, but then it lets go, and oh my gosh, really, really, really exceptional characters. I was talking about Anne Enright before with the Wren. This could be something that she wrote, or Claire Keegan, or Louise Kennedy. Just these incredible characters. And if you're a fan of Irish literature, absolutely put this on your list. It comes out next week, I think May 9th in the UK, and it comes out here in the middle of June. It is probably, one of my favorites of the year so far. All right, The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley. This has begun a lot of heat right now because it's the Good Morning America pick. This is a interesting book that deals with time travel. it centers around a department of the government in London that has had an experiment to bring people from the past back into present day. One of the people brought back is Graham Gore, who was on one of the ships in 1845 that went in to through the Northwest Passage, and all the people ended up perishing. And it's about his handler, who is a young woman, and what happens. What happens when all these people from the past are brought into modern day with texting and Spotify and Instagram and microwaves. So it's a very hard book to classify. It's partly a love story. It's partly a mystery. It's partly a thriller. It says it's not really about time travel, except it starts there. Where I ultimately enjoyed this, my problem with the book was exactly that. I don't know that it's completely successful on any front, except to make you kind of get turned on by a expedition explorer who's basically drawn as like the most charming, handsome, incredible man you'd ever know. So that was it for me. It was certainly not a bad book by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't know that it completely succeeded in any one thing, because it's a lot of different things. So, Hombrecito by Santiago Jose Sanchez. And thank you to Riverhead for this copy. This is about, it follows a young boy originally in the story who it's a coming of age novel. He, and his mother and his brother immigrate from Colombia to America. And a lot of it is him finding his identity, finding his, coming to terms with his queerness. The second half of the book, as he goes into adulthood, really becomes about his relationship with his mother. And it's almost like a tribute to his mother. It's a total vibe, this book. It reminds me, it's really exquisitely written. It reminds me a little bit of Call Me By Your Name. It reminds me of Javier Fuentes's Countries of Origin, which I absolutely loved. And if either of those books are books that you liked, this would probably be right up your alley. I don't know why, but for the very end of this, I started to get a little distracted. And I don't necessarily think it was the book. But overall, a totally strong debut, and I'm really glad I read it. Another Word for Love, Carvell Wallace. This is a nonfiction book. Carvell Wallace is a poet. This is a lot of meditations. It's not exactly linear, because it is about his life and growing up, but it doesn't mean that each section follows a necessary timeline. I found a lot of it fantastic. Clearly, I tabbed a lot of it because I loved a lot of what he had to say. This is very reminiscent and on par to me of like Saeed Jones' book, also Brian Broom's Punch Me Up to the Gods. If you liked either of those books, this could totally work for you as well. Again, I thought it was good. It wasn't earth-shattering to me, but I really, really enjoyed it. Next is The Gungle Abroad by Stephen Rowley. This probably doesn't need a lot of explanation, because so many of you probably have read The Gungle, or if you haven't, you should. It's a totally sweet book. I was obsessed with The Guncle. It came out at the exact right time during the pandemic, and I just thought it had so much heart. And Stephen is such a wonderful guy. I wanted to love this so much. And I was so happy to have these characters back. It's 5 years later from when The Guncle ends. And I had a very mixed bag. Ultimately, I liked this. Is it The Guncle? No. Is it a high mountain to climb following The Guncle? Absolutely. There are some really wonderful things in here, including a lesbian aunt, that is really funny and a great character. And ultimately, I think that Rowley, one thing that he does so well is he's ultimately really able to pull on your heartstrings. And he successfully does that here as well. Like I said, it didn't fully work for me all the time. But these are minor quibbles. If you liked the Guncle, you'll certainly probably want to pick this one up as well. It's not really a standalone, so for those of you who've not read it, you really should go back and read the first one. The last thing was this massive, I'm so glad we had this time together, by Maurice Vellekoop. I was sent this book by Pantheon, and I was so excited because I'd seen it, and it's a graphic memoir, and you know, I just have to tell you guys that it's stunningly beautiful. I mean, so beautiful. He was a Canadian. He is a Canadian who grew up, wanted to be an artist, also dealing with the fact that he was gay, coming to terms with his sexuality, as you could tell by the cover. Basically, I think probably I had that pose at one point as a little kid while I was listening to Helen Reddy's Delta Dawn. All right, so I thought this was fantastic. First of all, he's a crazy talented artist. The money that was put into this thing to produce it, it's really beautiful. I'm really kind of getting into these graphic stories just because it's such a different reading experience. And but this was really, really good and interesting, and I'm so grateful that they sent me a copy. But I really would have bought it anyway because I was so intrigued. So, all right, so there we go. 15 books. So the last thing I want to talk about is not really book related, except it's play related, I guess, which is I watched on Netflix this week, Baby Reindeer. I don't know if any of you have seen it. I'd be so curious as if you have what you thought of it. It's based on a play by Richard Gadd. It was a one-person play that he wrote about his experience when he was a stand-up comic in his 20s who he was working in a bar, and he was nice, basically friendly one night to a woman who came into the bar who it elevated quickly, and she became his stalker for over 2 years. And what happened? It was really, really good, really intense. And I will just say out loud, episode 4, trigger warnings for sexual assault. It's pretty intense, but ultimately it was some exceptional storytelling, some extraordinary acting, and I would say check it out. And if you have checked it out, I would so be interested in your thoughts. All right, you guys, that's it for me. I'll be back in a few days or early next week with what I'm planning to read for May, as well as some other things that I wanted to talk about. We're going to come back and, even though it's a little later, but discuss my first quarter favorites. So hopefully I will see you sooner than later. Thanks for sticking with me, and I'll see you soon.